Glad to know you're still with us right here on the morning edition. It's a real broadcast network. Our first commentary this morning, it goes to the statement made by Colonel Muhammad Maji's explanation of why he allegedly became involved in a plot to overthrow President Bola Tinubu, which has now reopened one of the most uncomfortable questions in Nigeria's political history. What happens when soldiers begin to lose faith in the government they are sworn to defend? In fresh court records, Maji says his actions are driven by patriotism, frustration over poor governance, insecurity, inadequate military welfare, and the worsening cost of living. He has apologized, asked for leniency, and insisted that his intention was not personal ambition, but what he described as a desire for a better Nigeria.
Well, the very strong arguments there, which creates quite an uncomfortable distinction. You can understand why a soldier may be frustrated with the state of a country, but I mean, frustration and patriotism, it does not give anyone a license to overthrow a constitutionally elected government. Maji himself now appears to recognize that distinction. He says his detention was challenging and revealing that he has come to understand there are lawful ways of expressing grievances within the military. But before we dismiss this as simply another coup plot, we need to understand why Nigerians should take the allegation seriously. Now, when we talk coup politics, it's not some strange foreign language in the country. Nigeria's first military coup came on the 15th of January 1966. The country then experienced a counter coup later that year, the Civil War and decades of military rule. Now, between 1966 and 1999, Nigeria witnessed 6 successful coups, 2 failed coups, and 3 additional alleged coup plots. And I mean, that's quite the staggering history, if you ask me.
But before we get right into that, and military rule was not some brief interruption in Nigeria's history. Between 1966 and 1979, and again between 1983 and 1998, the military controlled the executive, legislature, and judiciary. Nigeria finally returned to uninterrupted civilian democratic government in 1999, and that transition remains the country's longest continuous period of democratic governance since independence.
Well, so when a serving colonel talks about soldiers becoming frustrated with government, Nigerians cannot afford to hear only the political drama. We have to listen to the warning signs without legitimizing the proposed solution. I mean, because history has already shown us that military coups rarely arrive with a press conference announcing, "Good morning, Nigerians, we're about to destroy democracy." That rarely happens. They usually arrive wrapped in attractive language. Corruption has become unbearable. Government has failed. The people are suffering. The military has come to rescue the nation. You know, that sort of narrative. Were unsatisfied with what is happening. And so we have to find a way to change things. You know, that sort of rhetoric, it's usually what precedes, you know, some of the coups that we've seen in the time past.
And that language has appeared repeatedly in Nigeria's history. The officers behind the January 1966 coup presented their intervention against the backdrop of corruption, political crisis, and allegation of electoral malpractice. In 1983, Muhammadu Buhari and other officers overthrew the elected government of Shehu Shagari amid widespread accusations of, corruption and economic mismanagement. Even Buhari's military government later launched the famous war against indiscipline, presenting military intervention as a solution to national disorder. And this is where the history becomes particularly instructive. Nigeria did not become a better democracy simply because the military said it was coming to clean up politics. Military government suspended constitutions, restricted political freedoms, and concentrated enormous power in the hands of few officers. So the problem with the "we are coming to save the country," quote and unquote, argument is that the people rarely ask whether they want to be saved that way.
I mean, the people, after all, are the very center of some of these agitations. And this is why Maji's complaints about military welfare deserve to be examined separately from the alleged coup plot. He talks about inadequate remuneration for personnel, housing, healthcare, pensions, he talked about the treatment of wounded soldiers and what he described as unequal career progression and godfatherism within the armed forces. These are very important issues. He argues that the military needs a formal channel through which personnel can communicate their grievances to the chief of staff without fear of victimization. Time and time again, we've seen soldiers come out to complain that, how we're being treated, how much we're being paid, some of the working conditions for some of us who are, combating terrorism is really not favorable, right? And the backlash to that has been suspension, calling them out, sometimes even dismissal from the force. And several times we've had experts on security who have told us, there are ways to go about this in the military. And I mean, that raises the question as to how well structured are those channels of expressing any grievance that a personnel might have about welfare, about remuneration, or any issues they may be facing, in the field. Now, imagine years in operational theater, watching colleagues get wounded or killed, while worrying about what happens to your family if something happens to you. So Maji specifically argues that casualty management and family welfare affect the morale of serving personnel. He also raises concerns about pensions, housing, and healthcare. These are legitimate questions that any serious government should be willing to confront. So while we talk about the fact that, the plot didn't come true, but I mean, for some of the concerns that have been raised around welfare, are we also looking into some of those issues?
Right, because you did point out when all of these issues are being raised, it's being faced with, or the reply that comes in is there are ways, there are channels to which all of these matters can be addressed. So while we saw Justice Crack the other day, who pointed out,
you can't talk about it on social media,
the welfare of army personnel and security personnel, and the next thing we saw was you saw how that played out, right? You can't say that on social media. There are proper channels, but the officers themselves are also calling for a better channel for communication. So if we have a channel of communication, why do we still have this same story, these same complaints come in every time a military personnel has to complain about something? It has to do with welfare. It has to do with how much they are being
remuneration.
paid. Remuneration. It has to do with their families, who takes care of them when they are gone. Even when they are present here, what is the welfare for their families? Immediate and even extended families now. So
what about those who are retired?
Retired personnel, those who were injured, they were caused to retire because in the battlefield, they had to get out because some have lost their legs, their arms, different injuries. So even the people who go ahead to treat the doctors who treat them, they're also security personnel. You ask yourself, this is happening to my own colleague. What is going to happen to if something like this happens to me? You see this play out. So these reasons, yes, there was a coup plot. Thankfully, it didn't happen because you don't even want to imagine how a coup can play out in the country, right? It didn't happen, but the issues behind that, were they addressed? Are they being addressed? Do we have any committee being set up to address these complaints that have come in over time? Year in, year out, you hear military personnel say this. There are those who haven't even know where their fate lies as to retirement, monies that should be paid to them. It's just a lot. So are we addressing these issues? And there's also an almost ironic contradiction here. The soldiers are being asked to defend a country where ordinary citizens are complaining about exactly the same thing he's complaining about. The cost of food, education, housing, transportation, healthcare. Now, Maji talks about struggling to raise 5 children on his salary and says he sees no hope for the common man. So if the military personnel who are working for the government are also complaining as those who are not working for the government, so where that puts the Nigerian people, because there's another side of this story. Nigeria has increased spending on defense and security because the country is fighting multiple security threats simultaneously. The military is also confronting terrorism, banditry, insurgency, kidnapping, and other forms of armed violence across different theaters. Now, yet, throwing more money at defense does not automatically translate into better welfare for the individual soldiers. Now, the real question is whether resources reach the front line, whether equipment gets to work, whether wounded personnel are properly treated, and whether families receive the support promised to them. I'm pretty sure if you go by the books and try to combat all of this, you'll find that there have been monies allocated to some of these personnel who still come out to complain that it doesn't get to us. So what should the military be doing at this point? Is it just to refute claims? Is it just to, put a barricade to say you can't say that? There are proper channels, When these issues are now brought to the proper channels, what is being done at the end of the day?
I mean, you've raised some very important issues, Marian, to
Right.
say, look, whatever issues or challenges the soldiers are facing, they're still part of the Nigerian society, right? It's basically what everyone else is talking about. And soldiers have families too. They have bills, to pay. And I mean, when you look at Maji's account, it appears to show some form of progression. The alleged movement, he said, began during Buhari's administration. It was suspended, it was later revived after some colleagues encouraged him following what he described as another failed promotion opportunity. In fact, the alleged plot was fueled by his failure to secure promotion to Brigadier General on 2 occasions. So somewhere between patriotism and personal grievance lies another question. How much of this was really about Nigeria, and how much was about an officer who believed the system had treated him unfairly? So he raised some concerns about the state of the economy and welfare for soldiers. But I mean, on the other hand, we're also talking about a soldier, who for some reason he felt he's been unfairly treated, denied a due promotion. And this is where patriotism becomes a very dangerous word. Almost anyone can claim to be acting in national interest. A politician can say it, a protester can say it, a military officer can say it. But in a constitutional democracy, patriotism can simply mean doing what you personally believe is best for the country. It must also mean respecting the rules that allow 200 million people with completely different opinions to live under the political system. I mean, it doesn't mean that what you believe to be right is the way that we should go, because everyone has different interpretations of what has to be done or the right way, to go about things. I mean, quite a very extensive conversation to be had on this very subject, Marian.
Yes, which brings us to the central issue this morning. The question is not simply whether Colonel Maji's explanation sounds patriotic. The question is whether Nigeria has built institutions strong enough to absorb frustration, without allowing that frustration to become a threat to constitutional government. When people come out to complain, when officers, your employed officers, come out to lay complaints, how do you address them? Do you have system in place to address all of these grievances when they do come out, so that we do not now have those grievances turn into threats to our constitution and to our country, Nigeria?
Very important questions. How are the concerns raised, around welfare addressed by the government? And where do we draw the line between patriotism and now going out of your way to do something that might put the security of lives and property in the country in jeopardy?